So when it comes to data-driven EPC projects, one of the most important things we need to set up and manage correctly is the WBS, the work breakdown structure. I will show you how to set up the WBS using Brumata, our platform. To do so, at the start screen, you can go to the left corner. Here it shows general. You can open this up and it shows control, setup, and reference. We want to set up the project. You can see a couple of areas here on the left. Project, which is the project information, the WBS, the parties involved in the project, project-specific logic, and the workflow that we want to apply to this project. So let's start by adding a new project. You can see that right now I have no active project, so let's add the first one. I click on New. You see a couple of fields here. We have the project code, the client, project name, location, and a project description. Here at the top is what is called a BPF, a business process flow. These numbers represent two LODs. This is level of development. And what we can do here is we can manage and communicate the maturity of the project itself. So at an LOD 100, it is just the product identification. We might have heard about the project and we want to store that in our systems. Then later, we might want to develop a proposal and send it out. And then if we get a project awarded and we're executing a project, we're increasing those numbers. And then finally, when we do a project closeout, the LOD 500 has been achieved. So in this case, let's start by with our new project, and we click on the first one, 100. So we need to identify a few fields. We need to identify the client, the project name, a project start date, and a project sequence. So let's start with our client. I already added one record. It's the MIID, it's the name of my client, and I add a project name. The name of the project is the Garini project, so I will select that. And the project date is what I like to use is the project start date or the date that it was first identified, which was on the 20th of February. Project sequence, you can use this number if you have multiple projects starting on the same day. You can add the sequence, so I add number 2 in here. Great. Now I can save this record. When the record is saved, I can now move it to the next stage. That means I have now officially identified a project and it generates for me a unique project code. You can see with the log, I cannot assign this myself. This has been generated by the system to make sure every project has a unique identifier. Now we can add in a project description as well. I will paste that in here. So this is the Margarini project, which is a renewable project, solar power panel project. So that is also identified. And then I can also add a location. So right now I do not have any locations yet. So I can click on New. That brings me to locations. I need to generate a location identifier. Now for this one, I will use this number, 8200-1. I will put in a location description, which is the project site in Glifi County. And I will add some more information. Actually, I want to try this one. You see here, drop files of smart paste for Copilot to make a suggestion. Let's give that a shot. I can copy on my other screen. I copy all my project information and I can click here to have Copilot try to fill in all the fields based on what I have currently copied. So let's see how that works. Great. It identified the descriptions, the city, the region, and my latitude and longitude for my project. Wonderful. Now I can go here and confirm each of these. Save and refresh. You now see the project code. KE80200 in Dakacha in Kenya. Great. So now this is available. I can now select this location for my projects. Let's click Save again. So I made a project, I have a location, and I identify the client being MID. Now let's move to the WBS. The WBS is in this section. We see a WBS dashboard, the WBS layer, and a reference code. Let's move to the WBS layers. When we develop the WBS, the work breakdown structure, we need to break it down into several layers. Now, this fully depends on how you as an organization would like to do this. What you see here is how I would like to do it. At top level, this is the project. So if I have several projects, I can manage them in the same platform. Then units within the project, areas like your construction work areas, blocks or buildings, modules, and then packages. So this is the structure that we will use to set up this the WBS in Brumata for this particular project. Let's move to the WBS and let's add our first. Again, we click on New to set up the WBS. A parent WBS, well, the first layer doesn't have a parent, as in the layer it sits under. So we start with just the WBS level code. For the WBS level code, I'm going to use the same thing as the project code that was generated. I will use the same name and I will provide a similar description. I save this and now I have my first WBS set up. Now in this level, I now want to add, let's say, children, right? So this one doesn't have a parent because it's the top level, but now I want to make the children sitting below this one. Let's hit refresh for a second and then you see that also this WBS has been assigned with that same code and this is the full name of the WBS. So let's click on children to add the next layer within the WBS. So this would be the units, right? The top level was a project. The second level are the units. So in here, I click on the new WBS and it already pre-fills that the parent WBS is P2K2. I will add my next level, which is I use a code SP. I call the area solar power and the description is a solar power generation plant. The next thing I want to do with this particular unit is I want to map it to a reference scope. Now a reference scope is like a library of several types of industries and facilities that you can use to later identify based on across all your historical projects to see if you can find the information related to a certain type of project. So this would be your key quantities, your durations or cost or anything that you can record during this project will be mapped to a certain reference scope. So let's click here and there is a long available list. Now in this particular case, I am looking at I for industrial projects, PE, REN for renewables, and then solar. Right, this is a solar farm facility. I click save and that was the first, let's say, child, the unit in this area. If I click save and close, I go back to the previous screen and you now see that it automatically generated the code by combining the code of the parent and the next level. We can enter another one. So let's generate the areas for the utilities and essential services. And I hit save and close and it's the same thing. Notice how here I skipped the step of adding the reference scope. I can repeat this for the other areas as well. So the next one will be a welfare area for the workers and the temporary facilities for the project. Save and close. And I will continue to do so with a total of 6 units. So I've finished adding the 6 units as the next layer. So you see them here all generated with their code. If I now go back to the main screen of the WBS, you see that in total I have 7 rows, 7 records. I have the top level, which sits on WBS layer 0. And then I have the 6 units, all with a name and a code. Now, if I then want to continue to the next layer, I can select, for example, this one, the solar power unit, and then I will break this down into several areas. So here I can click on the child WBS, and then again, I'm creating children on this level, or let's say grandchildren on the top level. So I click on new WBS, and basically I can repeat that process. So let's add one particular example for this area. So this is with my SP. So the one that I want to use is I want to break down the solar panel areas into 2 different areas. So a zone AA and zone B. So let's do that. And let's add another one, which we call a zone B with a description to that, right? So now it has the 2 children generated. And again, it basically combines this code. So it takes up the code from the parent, it adds their own level code to generate. This is running on the background. Wonderful. So now I have this one. If I go back again to the main screen, I now see that within this level, I now have 2 areas, zone A and zone B, with the auto-generated code and identification on where it sits in the hierarchy. Now, this can become a very long list by having all the WBS identified. To get an idea on where we are in this process and how far we have done so far, we can click on the WBS dashboard. This visualizes the hierarchy that we are currently building. Let's give it a few seconds for letting it load, and then it visualizes for us the WBS that we're currently building, right? We see the diagram at the bottom, so we can see the project. We can see that it has 6 units and that we've broken down 1 unit into 2 areas, Zone A and Zone B. Wonderful. So now we can further expand on this process. So we can go back into this table and add the remaining ones. So I went ahead and added everything else up to the layer 2. Great. So obviously it can be quite a tedious job to enter them one by one. Now, if you're actually developing your WBS at the beginning of your project and you basically start breaking down these areas, then probably doing this manually in this way is absolutely fine. Now, if you already have your WBS maybe outside the system and you have developed that, let's say maybe in an Excel sheet, there's also a way to import that. Now, it's important to note that because we're building a hierarchy, you always need to make sure that the parent is already in the system when you load the next layer. So in this case, I have everything with layer 0, 1, and 2. So I can import layer number 3. But I cannot yet import my layer number 4 because layer number 3 doesn't exist yet. So that's a thing to note, to make sure that you import layer by layer. So there's a couple of ways to do that. The one that I personally like is here it shows export to Excel. But if you open up this one, it shows open in Excel online. So this allows export, but it also allows a screen where you can actually import data. So it shows the full data set as well here in Excel. And then when we hit save, it will try to process this data and it changes back into the platform. So very powerful, but it also makes sure that it actually checks. So certain fields are actually auto-generated, like this name and this coding system. So filling in anything here doesn't really do anything because the system will override it with its auto-generated systems. So let's do the next layer. So that will be layer number 3. So I will copy over from my other screen all the names. So those are here. I have roads and buildings and what have you. I have developed their level codes that I want to use for each of these buildings. So in this case, I'm choosing to use a 3-digit identification. Can be anything. Here it was 2 letters, so it's up to you on how you define each layer. As long as the whole code itself generates a unique WBS, you are basically free to choose whatever you like. Then let's go and add the parents. Now, here it is important that when we're adding these need to exist, right? So this first one, underscore ATEA, that exists. Right, so this already exists, and that's going to make a lookup to this one, so to understand that which one it belongs to. So I have the code, I have the level code, and I have the WBS level name. Now the only other thing that I want to add here is my description, which I have prepared, and I will add that as well. The rest I don't need to add. I hit save, and then this will brings us to a screen where it will try to import all of these records. I can click track progress to see what is happening. Here you can see all my previous my import attempts. Maybe in some cases there were errors, but right now we're focusing on this one. So I just submitted this one. And then if I click refresh, we can see that right now it was completed, 27 successes. So it added 27 records. We can close this screen. And so now it shows 22, and then if I hit refresh, I now see that I have 49 records sitting in my WBS. Wonderful. Let's take a look at our dashboard for a moment to see if it now greatly expanded, right? So now we have 27 blocks in all these different areas. Great, but we're not finished. We have let's say, high granularity in our WBS. We want to go up to a module level. So let's go back to the WBS and basically repeat that process with the import, because definitely this one is going to be a long list. So I'll break it down. First, I did level 0, 1, and 2. And then because 2 was available, I was able to import layer number 3. And now I'm going to import layer number 4. Same process, open in Excel Online. Again, we see the whole set being available. And I will do the same thing by providing the names of the modules that I want, the coding that I want every module to have, and a lookup to the parent WBS, which now exists in this system, right? So I have prepared this, made sure that the parents actually exist. And then let's add the descriptions as well, which is this column, add the descriptions, and hit save again. And the same process. And then if everything goes well, I click track progress and I can hit refresh to see the process. So it identified 80 records. It's currently parsing, currently importing. It imported 50 records, proceeding with the other 30, and now it is completed. So 80 new records up to layer number 4. Wonderful. 49. I hit refresh, and now I have a total of 129 items in my WBS. And you see that it is currently, the automation is running, adding the codes in here. So these are currently empty. If I hit refresh, we slowly see these codes being populated, resolving all of these. All right, let's go to our dashboard and see how the result looks like. So now we have another 40 modules in here. Now I can also play around a bit and explore my project in this way. So let's say I want to see the project level and the units. And then I want to go to, let's say, the solar power unit. I can expand. And here I have the 2 areas that I added manually earlier, plus 2 additional ones that I added later. And then I continue to expand to say, okay, these are the blocks, and then these are the modules. So a very powerful approach to understand the WBS that sits in your project. Now, when this is available, this list here in the WBS, it becomes your lookup on all the other items. So when you're going to assign a tag or you're going to assign a deliverable, you always need to map it to one of these WBS codes. Now, in this case that you have your own coding, or maybe the client has a different coding system, you can also add an alternative WBS code to each of these levels. I will give you one example. So if you click in this one and we can go to metadata, it shows who generated this record. But here I can also identify a reference WBS. So this would be an external or an alternative name for this particular WBS, which I can later also use to import and map data against. So really powerful. And I hope this helps in setting up your WBS in your project.